Oh, good day to you, friend. Seamus here. Thank you for joining me for a bit more Santa silliness, although today is a bit more sweet than silly. I think you'll like it. Our appreciation to all of you who have been liking the video here on YouTube, sharing it out to your friends. We really appreciate that. For you that have subscribed recently, and there's been a bunch of you, thank you and welcome. And to you kind souls that have sent a lot of coffee via the Buy Me a Coffee app, which is down below, we appreciate that too, because I can use all the caffeine help I can get. Anyway, friends, we're going to be getting started right now. This is a wonderful little story. It'll be familiar to many of you. This is simply called Miss Virginia's Letter. It's a wonderful old story that begins in 1897 in New York City. There was a young girl by the name of Virginia O'Hanlon, and that summer she had something wonderful happen. She turned 8 years old. But as many 8-year-olds will remember, there's times when at about that age you start to think that maybe you're more of a grown-up than a little baby, and you need to think about important things. And she had been thinking about a lot of things. And just as school was starting, she was chatting with some friends, thinking about how, now we're in school, we're here until Thanksgiving, but Christmas is coming, and after that, with Christmas time, we have Santa Claus, and of course that led to her and some of her friends speaking about Santa, and some of her friends saying that they no longer believed in Santa Claus. Well, Virginia was quite upset. And that night when she got home, she went to her father. And she asked her father that very question, whether or not there was a Santa. Her father was a very important man in town, a doctor, a surgeon at the local hospital. And she said, "Father, would you tell me simply whether or not, what's the truth, is there a Santa?" Well, as any father would at the time, he did his best to maintain her happiness, but she just wasn't convinced. And she told him so. She said that answer doesn't really answer my question, Papa. What do I do? And he said, well, if you really want to know what's true, why don't you write the Sun? And the Sun back then was the most important newspaper in New York City. Well, he laughed it off, thought it was a wonderfully silly thing to say to his young daughter, forgetting just how precocious she was, and she did that very thing. In her own fine 8-year-old cursive, she wrote a letter to the Sun, put it in the mailbox and sent it off, waited for a response and waited for a response until, of course, she forgot all about it. Now, friends, understand the New York Sun at that time was one of the most important papers in a city of over 3 million people. They received hundreds of letters a day, maybe even thousands of letters a day. But somehow, this one little letter from this sweet young lady got the attention of one of the employees at the paper. They passed it up the line, and it went up the line and up the line again, and it took some time, but eventually it made its way onto the desk of Mr. Francis Purcell. Purcell was one of the editors at the New York Sun, a well-respected author, or a writer. He had been a newspaper man for pretty well most of his life, a graduate of Columbia University. He had been a war correspondent, a well-respected writer, a well-recognized editor. And in time, somehow, young Virginia's letter ended up on his desk. Well, as soon as he saw the letter, as soon as he saw how important that request could be to a young lady, he knew that he had to respond, and respond he did. And soon after that, his answer made its way into the paper. Well, on the evening that paper came out, it was the very last editorial on the very last column of that page. But yet, people still saw it. And soon after dinner time, a friend of the family came knocking at the door and spoke to Dr. O'Hanlon and said, "Did you see your daughter's letter? Did you see the letter?" And the doctor said, "Whatever you do, you mean?" And they said, "Your daughter wrote a letter to the Sun," and they answered it. Well, what commotion across the household. Dr. O'Hanlon called in his wife and his children and the staff in the house, and they all got together around the table, and he read the article out. And it was to say it was a time of great joy, well, that's just an understatement. For there on the paper in black and white in the New York Sun was this article. It started, "Is there a Santa Claus?" in big bold type. "We take pleasure in answering at once and thus prominently the communication below, expressing at the same time our great gratification that its faithful author is numbered amongst the friends of the Sun. Herein is the letter. Dear editor, I am 8 years old. Some of my little friends say that there is no Santa Claus. Papa says if you see it in the Sun, it is so. Please tell me the truth. Is there a Santa Claus? Signed, Virginia Hanlon, 115 West 95th Street, New York City." The family read on, surprised that the newspaper ever would have responded, and this is what they read. "Virginia, your little friends are wrong. They have been affected by the skepticism of a skeptical age. They do not believe except what they see. They think that nothing can be which is not comprehensible by their little minds. All minds, Virginia, whether they be men's or children, are little. In this great universe of ours, man is a mere insect, an ant in his intellect, as compared with the boundless world about him, as measured by the intelligence capable of grasping the whole of truth and knowledge. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity and devotion exist, and you know that they abound and give to our life its highest beauty and joy. Alas, how dreary would be the world if there was no Santa Claus. It would be as dreary as if there were no Virginias. There would be no childlike faith then, no poetry, no romance to make tolerable this existence. We should have no enjoyment except in sense and sight. The eternal light with which childhood fills the world would be extinguished. Not believe in Santa Claus? You might as well not believe in fairies. You might get your papa to hire men to watch all the chimneys on Christmas Eve to catch Santa Claus. But even if they did not see Santa Claus coming down, what would that prove? Nobody sees Santa Claus, but that is no sign that there is no Santa Claus. The most real things in the world are those that neither children nor men can see. Did you ever see fairies dancing on the lawn? Of course not. But that's no proof that they are not there. Nobody can conceive or imagine all the wonders that are unseen and unseeable in the world. You tear apart a baby's rattle to see what makes the noise inside, but there is a veil covering the unseen world which not the strongest of men, or even the united strength of all the strongest men that ever lived, could tear apart. Only faith, fancy, poetry, love, romance can push aside that curtain and view and picture the supernatural beauty and glory beyond. Is it all real? Ah, Virginia, in all this world, there is nothing else as real and abiding. No Santa Claus. Thank God he lives and lives forevermore. 1,000 years from now, maybe 10 times 10,000 years from now, he will continue to make glad the hearts of children. Well, friends, Virginia was the talk of the town that Christmas season, and she would go on to remember that letter for the rest of her life. The following year, many local papers republished the article, but the Sun was hesitant to do so. They waited a few years, and in fact, it was never revealed that their editor had written the article, that Mr. Purcell had written the article, until after he had passed in 1906. What a great story, what a great thought. And friends, although I know that this is not a fairy tale, I can't help but thinking that Miss Virginia and all she cared about lived happily ever after. I do thank you for joining me today. Take good care of yourselves and of each other. Please feel free to like it and share it and subscribe and do all the good things. We will see you soon. Cheers. Ho, 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 ho.